So we are going to start, even though it was a little bit delay in our schedule, but we expect it. We'll start our panel. The first one that I'm trying to go exactly to the point that we would like to raise during our panel. The panel is the approaches of great and emerging powers on regionalism and political and security in the Middle East. We have also three speakers online, and actually our colleagues from Egypt, he could not join us even though online. So maybe next time, as I mentioned at the beginning, there is a lot of challenges because he's a general, active general in the army, and they have other duties during this time. I start the panel to introduce Professor Keyhan Barzegar. He's one of our partner in conveying this conference at the beginning. Currently, Keyhan is a senior academic advisor at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Iran, and also a professor at the Islamic University. Professor, you have the floor.
Good morning to everyone. Thank you to MEPEI, especially Dr. Flavius Cabamaria, Professor Murishan, and their co-organizers. I'm glad to be here to share some of my views as an Iranian academic. Let me share with you some of my points. First of all, I think that increased regional war and foreign intervention has somehow resulted in regional cooperation, thereby enhancement of regionalism in the region. That's a great change, I mean, in terms of geopolitical dynamics. And two examples of these are the Ukrainian war and recently the Gaza war. Unlike, the conventional wisdom, the war in Gaza did not somehow deteriorated relations between Iran and Saudi Arabia. On the contrary, they have strengthened their relations, and the foreign minister of Iran just visited yesterday to Saudi Arabia to settle the situation in the region. These wars, I think, brought diversification of relations between countries, their independence to conduct their foreign policy, and at the same time, their avoidance to take the third party's interest. They do not like to be part of any coalition or alliance with great power. They act separately. I think this is important to understand that countries in the region have come to this conclusion that they should follow their own national interest based on, of course, the strategic constraints that exist in the region with their relations with great power, no doubt. And as a result, I should say that Saudi Arabia no longer needs to choose between, for instance, America and China, or Iran and America, or even Russia and America. This is becoming from the fact that, diversification of relations is something new, getting out of the regional geopolitical development. And this will bring a lot of changes. And Iran's relations with the East or with the West is not based on ideological context, rather it is based on developmental approach and the fact that, or perhaps as a result of sanctions. And how to balance these between the East and the West is something that the Iranian foreign policy has the challenge to balance between these two. My point is that, the regional countries, emerging regional power, no longer need to stick with one great power. And they are going to follow their own track of foreign policy. And this is a geopolitical change when we are talking about the relations or the connections between global powers and regional emerging power. I think that global power need regional power to improve their regional status, because regional power can somehow impact the realities on the ground in different ways, militarily, politically, economically, and this comes from the determination of geography, regional supply chain, diplomacy of corridors, a lot of things. Geography matters a lot in this time we are talking, and I will tell you about this more. As a result of this war, I think three developments has happened in the international order that give more space to regional power to express themselves and play their own roles. First is the track of diplomacy. Great power diplomacy is no longer work as it used to. I think their main concept is power politics. They would like to take advantage of regional politics to somehow frame their global strategic interest. This doesn't work. I think the regional countries realize this, that the United States is not going to protect, for instance, Saudi Arabia in certain time, or Afghanistan in the certain time. They are self-interested, and they will go out whenever they think that their interest is not according to their state's interest, in a way. So here I think regional diplomacy is taking roots, because regional diplomacy is more based on the realities on the field. And of course, geographical attachment, and at the same time, the linkage between different security in the subsystems of the region. The Ukrainian war has affected the Middle East. The Middle East Gaza war is affecting the Ukrainian war. There is a linkage between security aspects of this. So the first is regional diplomacy vis-a-vis global diplomacy. And I think that the Gaza war has shown the failure of great power diplomacy in a way. And here I think the Ukrainian war was a turning point in bringing the global South concept in a way that it could somehow establish this concept of Western equation and non-Western world. And at the core of this, I think global South are taking advantage of this situation by bringing up, other regional countries to their side. This, of course, is not an anti-Western equation. I mean, the global South, they would like only to express themselves, not necessarily to act against the West. I think here, the too much use of the instruments of war and sanctions has shifted the countries to have this tendency of regionalism. And this is coming from that regional supply chain is taking the place of global supply chain. And this again goes to the determination of geography. Now we are talking about the strengthening of regional organizations like BRICS, Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and Eurasian Economic Development. These are the organizations that are acting and have been established for acting in parallel with old order organizations like IMF, World Bank, other things. So these are not anti-Western organizations. Again, I think something new is coming up, and that is the emergence of regional, equations in the global power politics. Then we have the geopolitics vis-a-vis technology. The Ukrainian war and the Gaza war recently are two interpretation or translation of these two concepts of battling between geopolitics and technology. Geopolitics is becoming as an element of solidarity, no doubt. Technology is becoming as an element of disintegration, division. We had this in the Israeli, attack to Hezbollah's facilities, and that has brought a new concept of how to deal with that. I think, other countries will try, as Hezbollah is doing, to compensate with its geopolitical superiority to somehow fill that technological, division. And this is something that is new, and it is in the line of global power, regional power relations. Regional power still have the element of geopolitics, of the superiority of geopolitics. They are a lot. And Western power have the element of technology. But how the two can be adjusted is a matter of question. Again, I think that geopolitics could return at any moment and compensate these technological deficiencies. Then the third issue that somehow changed the equation between global power and regional power is the matter of deterrence. Deterrence is a new concept. In substance, deterrence is not certain. No country has deterrence, I would say. So far as Israel is thinking that it is winning the war, this picture could be reversed as it was the case in the last week. Netanyahu said that in the Global Assembly in the UN that we are winning the war. But this week, he is thinking that he might lose the war because this is the fastness of the concept of deterrence, and it is not certain for any countries. I would say that deterrence is even relative, and no great power even have this privilege of having full deterrence. Great powers could be challenged by non-state actors, in a way. Great powers could be somehow challenged by the public opinion. I would say that one of the biggest, strategic mistake of Netanyahu's regime was to bring the Iranian people into the concept of deterrence. Actually, it was the Iranian people who forced the government of Iran to retaliate by missiles last week. And that was something new. That means that, escalations could bring deterrence at the same time. Because by that, you could engage, public opinion. And here, I think, when you escalate, then the countries becomes more calculated, more rational, and at the same time, more realistic. Iran attacks Israel. Israelis are thinking it's too weak now. If the Israeli attack, the Iranian will attack back harsher, and I don't know what the Israeli are going to do because this is the matter of escalation. The characteristic of escalation, which is very dynamic. You cannot see things in different way. Then it goes to the process of deterrence, and I finish in 1-2 minutes. Deterrence and public opinion. As I mentioned, Netanyahu went too far in South Lebanon and attacking Hezbollah. And I think escalation brings, de-escalation in a way. As I mentioned, he might think that he's winning the war, but you see that, other parties are, attacking back, and he's in a very bad situation. I do not believe that he is winning the war. Actually, I think that he is in a big trouble. And I think that by bringing the public opinion, not only in Iran, but also in entire region, and an Iranian attack refreshing the entire axis of resistance, the situation might be completely different in the coming weeks. And then it goes to the deterrence and, allied forces, as the Western called proxy forces. The question is that, is Iran dependent on these proxy forces? I would say no. I think based on its geography, based on its determination, based on its independent way of defense system, Iran can, retaliate directly. So this analysis or this view that the Israelis are saying by weakening Hezbollah, we are preempting Iran from a great, deterrence factor is completely wrong. I think Iran is doing exactly the deterrence matter based on its national capacity. And it is showing the force to say that the deterrence is coming from the original country. And this is not the fact that, proxy forces are defending Iran. Iran is defending them, and the exact focus of deterrence is based on the Iranian land. And again, I think it was the mistake of the Israelis to somehow examine this part of Iran, because right now and nowadays, the Iranians realize that they need to attack directly. And there is no need for, depending on indirect, deterrence aspect, which is go to that direction. And then it goes it goes to the deterrence and technology. As I mentioned, the Israelis' recent, measures by exploding pagers and walkie-talkies, other things, might have been a success for Israel in a way, but it has divided the concept of deterrence in terms of technology. Israel by that is saying that I am 10 years further than you, which might be true, but at the same time, this has a different message for the others. I think here geopolitics matter, because they could not advance in southern Lebanon because the field is important. So far as they do not access the field, they cannot talk of, deterring a powerful, organized, organization like Hezbollah. I don't think that this will somehow be relevant in that regard. My conclusion is that focusing on the role of regional power, emerging regional power in the new world order, is based on how to adjust and make compatible with these three, concepts that I mentioned: regional diplomacy, deterrence, and at the same time, the battle between technology and geopolitics. If the two sides could manage to adjust these three concepts, then we will witness a kind of cooperation between regional power and global power to somehow cooperate with each other to settle the regional crisis. And I think that's key for the regional order. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Barzagar. Now, we try to have an intervention online because our friend from Lebanon could not stay too much. Professor we'll have from Lebanon as a point of view. It's not necessary to represent the official standpoint. Professor Joseph Bahut, he is director of Issam Fares Institute for Public Policy and International Affairs from American University of Beirut.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I'm very sorry because I was invited to join you only 2 days ago, and so I I found it very nice, and I accepted to join, but I had really no time to really prepare a full intervention. And also, I think this panel is a bit crowded and we're late, so I will only say a few things, mainly focused on the Lebanese situation and on the Israeli-Lebanese confrontation that is taking place today, trying to tie it to the panel's title, I mean, the headline, and also to what I've listened to carefully in the last round of presentation, mainly, for example, reflecting on what Dr. Mousavian has said, and also Dr. Amersi has said. I listened to him carefully as often. I would like to mainly raise questions because, frankly, at the juncture where we are in today in Lebanon, at least, I think all, let's say, previous, let's say, affirmations or truths that we could have thought we have are today seriously under question. So I have more questions than answers, but these questions, I think, can help us move forward in the debate. I have 5 points, 5 questions mainly. The first one has to do with, and I'm starting from the lower level of the conflict, and then we'll go up. The first question has to do with Hezbollah. Hezbollah took some very, very, very serious blows in the last 2 months, well before the assassination of its Secretary General. It has started with the decapitation of the military structure, the killing of the chief of staff, Fuad Shukr, and then let's say, the dismantlement or the partial dismantlement of the communication systems with the pager operation, which was both a technical blow but also a moral blow to the party, and a sort of psychological, let's say, blow showing what Kayhan, my friend Kayhan, just talked about, this kind of technological superiority and the extent to which Israel has been able to penetrate the circuits, the networks of Hezbollah, and then culminating with then the killing of the elite unit's command, the Radwan unit, with some 10 to 15 commanders killed in one raid, and then ultimately the assassination of Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, and then maybe the assassination of his successor a few days ago. We're still waiting for confirmation of that. Okay, regardless of this, the question is what remains today of Hezbollah at all levels. Now, I think we can guess with a certain amount of certainty that the military, let's say, apparatus is shaken. I wouldn't say it's over, but it's seriously shaken. How far and how durable this shakeout is a question. And this will have a lot of consequences on the future of the battles, of the future of the war, because this war is now open and it won't stop tomorrow. We have to agree on that. Now, so far, Hezbollah is able to continue to fire missiles on cities in Israel, on Kiryat Shmona this morning, on Haifa yesterday evening, maybe tomorrow on Tel Aviv more persistently. So it means that the party is shaken, but its ability to harm Israel is still there. The ground operation by Israel is stalling. Kayhan just said it. Hezbollah's operational units on the ground are still performing quite well, despite the blows. But this is also open in time, because this cannot last very long if the Israelis will continue to hammer the country like they are hammering. But the question is mainly political. Regardless of what I said operationally, the question is political. It has to do with, first of all, what is remaining of the political structure? Who is now in charge of this party? We know that the structure politically is still here, but we also know, and you can feel it in Lebanon, that it is now underground. It has more or less disappeared underground because of the fear to be killed, because of the suspicion of treason, of penetration. So there's no one inside to talk to. Just to give you an example, when Speaker Berri in Lebanon talks, for example, about a ceasefire that Hezbollah has accepted, he has to say that Sayyid Nasrallah accepted it before he died, which is something we will never be able to confirm. And no one from Hezbollah is saying the contrary or affirming it. So this is one example. The second line, and which is more important, what will be Hezbollah in the future politically? Will it try to retain its grip on the political structure in Lebanon? Has it lost it? And if so, will the party transform? I think this is my hypothesis. The party will morph, it will transform. And my fear is that there are high chances that the party will go again, in a way or another, in a form or another, underground, and revert back to the sort of clandestinity it was in the 80s and the 90s, before a lot of things have succeeded in integrating it to the political process. Today, there's a very worrying American statement this morning in the press saying that the Americans are betting on the weakening of Hezbollah in order to push it out from government in Lebanon. This would be a huge adventure for the country, opening horizons, even reaching the risk of civil war in the country. And this is how I conclude my first point, because this is the transition to my second point. What is exactly the aim of Israel's war? What is exactly the magnitude of what Netanyahu has in mind pertaining to Lebanon? If you follow me a little bit, it has started with only a desire to secure the return of Israeli villagers to the north of Israel, meaning a sort of strengthening of Resolution 1701 through certain negotiation processes. It was the package that US envoy Amos Hochstein put on the table, and then lately the French-American initiative that was killed by the assassination of Hassan Nasrallah. But then now we are starting to listen officially from Netanyahu himself before yesterday, in a video that he has recorded addressing the Lebanese people themselves and telling them, you have to rebel against Hezbollah, you have to take this into your own hands, you have to disarm Hezbollah. And if you don't do, and he said it plainly, I'm not interpreting here, you will face the fate of Gaza. Meaning that we will increase the strikes and widen them in Lebanon, not only on Hezbollah targets, but on civilian infrastructure targets. Meaning that in a week, 2 or 3, I do not rule out the possibility that the Israelis will strike the airport, what remaining of the electricity network, telecommunications, civilian hospitals. They have already started to do so, in the hope of reaching a point where the Lebanese population will rise up against Hezbollah and ask for its disarmament or for its ousting of the political life. This is complete illusion. This is complete fiction, because it cannot happen. But if this is the Israeli aim, I think that we are entitled today to ask ourselves if the aim of Netanyahu is not actually to stir a civil disorder, a political and civil war disorder in Lebanon, in order to substitute for his inability to fight Hezbollah in a classical way. This is a real frightening thing, with, of course, on the horizon, the idea that he is stating already that he seeks to change the political order in Lebanon, something that we have lived in 1982 with the invasion, before Hezbollah existed. And by the way, this has given birth to Hezbollah. But I think that we have now to open up this possibility in Lebanon. My third question has to do with Iran. And here maybe I'm addressing Dr. Kayhan, or Dr. Mousavian or others. There is an enigma today, at least from a Lebanese point of view, if you allow me. What exactly Iran is up to after the blows that it has taken in Lebanon, and maybe in Gaza also? Is Iran today more or less swallowing, quote unquote, the blow and saying, okay, we have lost a lot, because the Lebanese loss is huge for Iran. But now, okay, it's time to find a new accommodation in the region. You know, in Lebanon, I don't share at all this, but you have people who are starting to say that Iran has sold out Hezbollah. It has done a deal with Israel, the US, and maybe the Gulf over the head of Hezbollah. I think this is completely wrong, but this sheds a light on a question about Iran's strategy today. Is it going to fight by its own, like Kayhan has said? How long are we going towards a collision course directly between Israel and Iran? I believe so. But what is the fate of the proxies, as we used to call them, or the allies? What is the level of investment of Iran today in a reconstruction of Hezbollah? We hear a lot of things that are contradictory, that Iranians are not anymore interested in reshuffling and reconstituting Hezbollah, so Hezbollah will be left on its own. This is why Hezbollah will probably drift towards a sort of new clandestine organization in Lebanon. Or we hear also that Iran is already sending a lot of experts and resources in order to reconstitute the party and reshape it. I don't know, but this is a real question. And I think that this question hides another enormous question in the region. Are we going towards an open, full-fledged confrontation between Israel and Iran that will at one point engulf the Americans and going towards the scenario that Netanyahu is trying to obtain and realize for the last 6-7 months now? Is he going to succeed in that? What will be Iran's strategy to avoid it? And what will be Israel's readiness to go all in, even at the level of changing the regime in Iran, as we are all seeing some signs of it, at least on social media and other places? Which leads me to my fourth question, to the US. How much, really, putting ideology or plot theory aside and etc., how much is the US covering all this? We have very troubling signs that are contradictory. On the one hand, you listen to some statements from President Biden, etc. We don't want a regional cycle of violence. We want to avoid full-fledged war. We are calling Israel for restraint and etc. But then at the same time, officially, you have, for example, Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin saying openly, we share Israel's goal in Lebanon. We share Israel's objective of eradicating Hezbollah. So this is not the same thing. And here there's a question. How to understand this American contradiction? Is it hypocrisy? Maybe. Is it the lame duck of a president who's at the end of his mandate? Maybe. Is there a division of labor and roles between good cop and bad cop in Washington? Maybe also. But what is exactly the horizon of that from now till the next presidential election? The fifth question becomes, and very quickly, it's also very troubling because we are in a panel that is supposed to address the game of powers in the Middle East, big powers and medium powers. The troubling factor is today the silence of Russia and China. I haven't heard anything from Russia so far, except very few statements regarding the enormous thing that is happening in Lebanon and in Palestine. Now, of course, on Palestine, Russia has expressed itself. But now we have serious, very serious indicators that the war on Lebanon is going all in and that this war is starting to reach Syria. We have very serious indicators, the last week at least, that Israel is also starting to prepare for a Syria campaign with the possibility of the regime being bombed and ousted after it has survived, thanks to Russian, let's say, efforts and help. And here there's a question between Iran and Russia. What is exactly happening? What is happening between Israel and Russia? Are the contacts that we know of that are very good usually between Netanyahu and President Putin going on? What are they talking about? What are they agreeing on? Do they have a plan for Syria, and what is this plan? And I think that here we have to question these big powers and their attitude towards what's happening? Are they accepting easily that the Middle East today is being reshaped by the foolish adventure of Benjamin Netanyahu, from Palestine liquidating the Palestinian question, to Lebanon changing the political order, to toppling the regime in Syria and replacing it with what we don't know, and then ultimately going and trying to change the regime in Iran? Is Moscow going to accept that? And if not, what is it going to do? And is Russia going to face this? Because ultimately, I think that all this is part of an American indirect, let's say, cornering of China for the decades to come. This is my last question. From there on, I will conclude by saying that everything concurs today to say that this war is open. It is going to increase in intensity. It is going to increase probably in geographical magnitude and extension, and it could maybe reach the level of something huge, a little bit, but even more grave and dangerous, a little bit resembling the American adventure in Iraq in 2003, with all the effects that we know and that the Middle East is still living today. This is the real question. How will we manage this period that is now open until at least the presidential election in the US, but mainly after? And are we going to inherit again a Middle East? And here I echo what Mr. Amersi was saying, a Middle East that has been tried to be reshaped many times in history, but every time in a bad way and in a way that has led to even more explosive results and configurations. I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Bahout. Interesting points from Lebanese side. So we are moving to our speaker from India. We have here General Sharma, who represents a prestigious institute from India, United Service Institute. Dear General, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. In fact, this is the second time I'm participating in this prestigious conference, and one has been enlightened through the morning discourse, which was full of collective wisdom. But what has emerged from the whole dialogue, that there are more questions that have arisen, and there are very few answers that we have. So in my discourse, I'm going to basically cover 5 important points. And one is that what is this contested world order that we are looking at? How in this contested world order, Middle East or West Asia is one of the center of gravity of global power shift. What is the prognosis of this conflict, particularly the risks and the escalation or the strategic behavior of other players? How does it impact India, and what is the way forward? Now, when you look at the series of strategic shocks that we have witnessed in the recent past, be it Talibanization of Afghanistan, Russia-Ukraine war, West Asian crisis, and there are 2 more in waiting, Taiwan, and then you have Korean Peninsula. And it reminds me what Lee Kuan Yew said, the founder of Singapore, that the state behavior is guided by social Darwinism, that there are only permanent interests and everything revolves around the balance of power. And that is exactly we are looking at in a very zero-sum game or zero-sum outlook towards the world. Now, at the heart of this whole thing is, I think, the balance of power between United States of America and China. Let's face facts. And this contestation is ideological, it is civilizational, it is basically the contestation over domination of locations, resources, particularly, the semiconductors, chips, rare earth minerals. It is also about, the new technology, artificial intelligence, disruptive technology, lethal autonomous weapon systems, domination over the global systems of governance like UN and Bretton Woods institutions, and it is panning out to the new strategic frontiers, that is outer space, cyberspace, and information space. And what we are also seeing is that there is a new generation warfare which has taken birth, and this is multi-domain warfare, which involves politics, diplomacy, economy, particularly you see how economic sanctions are being used, technology, and informational. And it used both state and non-state actors who are operating in a gray zone, in a hybrid kind of a warfare. Now, this is a new reality. And as a result, there is an emergence of totally antagonistic alliances. On one hand, you have Euro-Atlantic Alliance, then you have NATO, then there is an East Asian alliance system which is building bridges now, at least 3 or 4 countries of East Asia with NATO, you see how they're participating in those summits. On the other hand, the Anglo-Saxon world has coined a new term, what you call is the CRINC, China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea. How much it is true or not is a debatable point. And in this whole milieu is the emergence of Global South, which is still a very kind of a nebulous concept. Because though we've been talking about Global South, but who is championing the cause of Global South and what are the leverages those countries have remains a moot point. But we are seeing certain harbingers in the beginning. And one is, you look at the Quad, you look at AUKUS, these are the 2 organizations. There is an Indo-Pacific economic framework. There is also, some kind of an Indo-Pacific collaboration to deal with non-traditional security threats. And at the heart of this is to balance China's Belt and Road Initiative. On the other hand, in terms of multipolarity, which Russia and China is today espousing, you see the expansion of BRICS. There are about 10 countries of BRICS today, and you have an expansion of Shanghai Cooperation Organization, which has 9 countries, and there are many other dialogue partners and observers, and many other countries want to wait to enter this. And these are pan-Atlantic kind of a countries. They are not confined to one particular geography, but these are multiple geographies which will bring these countries into BRICS and into Shanghai Cooperation Organization. So that is where we are, and it is in this context that if you look at the BRICS and all, they are going to throw up issues like de-dollarization, multipolarity, future of Global South, and we are also seeing in this milieu the arms race and also the nuclear saber rattling. In fact, Middle East or West Asia is going to be a new nuclear flashpoint in times to come. And unfortunately, in this entire milieu, today, United Security Council's become a sitting duck. It's become totally dysfunctional, it's highly polarized. It is in this context we have to contextualize what is happening in West Asia. And I would say, unless we look at certain critical factors which drive the geopolitics of Central Asia, we will only be looking at the offshoots, but not at the fundamental problems. And one is the geostrategic location of West Asia, its importance in terms of energy resources and supply chain corridors, particularly related to the energy, and the domination over those energy corridors is extremely important. Second is the very, very fractured and fragmented ethno-regional character of this region, be it Arab-Sunni, Arab-Shia divide, Arab and what you call is the Persian divide, be it Sunni-Shia divide, be it Semitism versus political Islam. These are the fault lines which need to be addressed. If these are not addressed, we will not be able to proceed. Third is, I think the world has to look at that why many treaties and accords, Camp David, Oslo, Abraham Accord, All these have been signed, but before the ink dried up, these were violated by Israel and its master, that is United States of America. Why? And to me, it appears that the only way to call this bluff is at the United General Assembly, UN General Assembly, where the Committee of Nations should come up and raise a voice about this kind of a, what you call is the duplicity in the behavior of some of these countries. But at the moment, the most pertinent issue is how do you manage escalation in West Asia? And that is what is going to be the behavior of Israel in regard to the 200-odd missiles, ballistic missiles, which Iran has launched. What mechanism, how the world can put a pressure so that this does not escalate out of control. My personal sense tells me today, Netanyahu is only emboldened and he's itching for a fight. So how this pans out, whether they are going to target Iran's military assets, whether it is the oil and gas infrastructure, whether it is their some kind of a nuclear targets, and then what is going to be Iran's response? How is Iran going to respond? Because Iran is not going to sit tight and let Israel have its own way. This requires a solution. Next is the strategic behavior of other countries. We know United States of America is talking with a forked tongue. What you call is running with the hare and hunting with hounds kind of a policy. And it is going to give full support to Israel if Iran and Israel escalation spans out of control. And that will bring in other countries into the fray. For example, European Union today. It is totally divided. There is a dilemma. On one hand, they are espousing the cause of Iran and Palestine, talking about two-state solution. But in the same breath, they are also talking about, Israel's right for self-defense. Self-defense against whom? Right? Who is targeting, who is attacking Israel? So it is again a duplicity. Then if United States of America gets involved in this escalation, it is but a matter of time that Russia will have to get involved. Because Russia has bases in the Mediterranean. They have number of bases in now, even in African countries. And their interests are very deeply involved here. So Russia gets involved. Now, in what form Russia gets involved? One is in terms of providing the military hardware to Iran, air defense systems, aircraft, fighter aircraft. Second is to push the button on the Ukrainian front, to pose dilemmas for United States of America. So you will see an escalation on the Ukrainian side. As far as China is concerned, Chinese stakes are very high in terms of Belt and Road Initiative, the Maritime Silk Route, in terms of their trade, the energy resources. So what Chinese are likely to do is that probably they will pitch themselves for a mediation, what they did between Hamas and Fateh, and other thing they did between Iran and Saudi Arabia. So a more kind of a mediation push is going to come from the Chinese. Whether that is acceptable to United States of America is a moot point. But I would say the most critical element in this entire matrix is about the response of the Arab world. So far, there has been some kind of a dissonance within the Arab world, whether they predicate their rapprochement with United States of America and Israel on the two-state solution. Things are still not very clear. If Arab world is able to put its act together and seek rapprochement with Iran, I think we will be able to neutralize many of the negative factors in the region, which will only benefit Israel and United States of America. Now, how does it affect India? India, West Asia is India's strategic neighborhood. Nearly 85% of our energy is coming from that region. There are about 9 million people, our diaspora, who lives in this region, and they send to the tune of about $90 billion as what you call the remittances from there. So this is extremely important. Peace in this region is extremely important for India. We are also very aspirational in terms of operationalization of India, Middle East, Europe economic corridor, Israel, India, United States, and UAE, kind of what you call is the Southern Quad. Also, our interests are because of international north-south corridor in which Iran becomes extremely critical partner for India, and also Vladivostok-Chennai corridor. Therefore, India would like to pitch for some kind of a mediation, though our policy is that we do not want any act of terrorism to be used against the civilian targets. At the same time, historically, India has been in favor of two-state solution. So I think we'll keep balancing our relations, but there are other factors which will impact India's policy choices. And one is because we have about $10 billion worth of trade with Israel. They're giving us high-end technology. How do we balance our relations between Israel and Iran on one hand? And should the United States of America get embroiled there, then how do we balance our relations with the US on one side, China and Russia on the other side? So these are some of the imponderables. But the way forward, I would say at the end of the day, war is not a solution to the problems there. It will damage everybody. In fact, today's Israeli security is far more gravely impacted than it was ever before. I would say Israel is the most insecure country despite its tactical victory at the battlefield. So in the long run, I think Arab rapprochement is extremely important. Rapprochement between Arab and Iran is extremely important because that will then give you the collective weightage to balance out China-Israel nexus. And the third thing I think we should look at making use of United Nations General Assembly as a platform. Also strengthen the verdicts that have been given by International Court of Justice and International Criminal Court. Have a voice, go for ceasefire, and towards the end, I think look for a two-state solution in which there may be certain notional exchange of territory so that geo-ethnically the whole region, whether this is Israel or Palestine or the other side, it looks as a homogeneous entity and there are no fault lines which are left, which can simmer and which can erupt in times to come. So with these words, I hope that good sense will prevail and international community, particularly Global South, will play its role as a balancer in this otherwise in an extremely contentious and antagonistic geopolitics. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, General. We appreciate your point of view. Now we are moving here in our region. Our colleague from Turkey, Dr. Taha Ozan. So he represents Ankara Institute in the capacity of director. Dear Taha, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you. Really appreciate it for the invitation and organizing this timely conference. Since the title is huge, from global to regional, not easy to cover up and go specifics. Usually talking about global developments and the transformation, unfortunately, ends up with empty words. But this time, really, it's a fractured world, and the global and regional order faces immense pressure for transformation. Yet this pressure lacks the positive agenda seen in the previous decades. It does not aim to unite markets or nations, nor does it foster shared commercial interests as it did at the end of the last century at a certain level. Key actors in global geopolitics and economics are grappling with serious challenges. Besides rising risk of conventional war, is there economic confrontation is already taking place in front of our eyes. While US and China forcing the economic order into G2 world, where rest of the countries will be squeezed between them, Europe started to see US as other China and openly pronouncing it at the highest level of European bodies, and the rest is struggling to update their alliance map because traditional alliances turned into a fluid alliances, or call it period of a kind of polygamy is rising as optimistic thinking, and no one knows if it will work or not. Deglobalization, partial globalization, rising economic nationalism, subsidies, policies, emerging new custom walls, trade wars, list goes on. But everything is telling us economic trade war is already in the place. The US, despite being world's largest economy and military power, is mired into political instability. If I were using this sentence 20 years ago, 15 years ago, this will be a kind of conspiracy or overrated thing, but this is an ordinary line in any analysis right now, and it's being pronounced very easily. US is in the stage of the political instability. I think it's a fearful thing because this much big or the biggest military power being in political instability or having an elite crisis will have some consequences. While US in this position, China's economy expected to be surpass the US, reveals all kinds of vulnerabilities in both economic and the geopolitical strategies. As a bloc, the third option may be Europe, but they are struggling with the significant economic, political, and geopolitical difficulties and having a big problem of leadership crisis. In sum, global geopolitical and economic downturn deepens by the day, and the remedies applied seem ineffective. The current crisis is structural, and keep in mind, it will resist simple geopolitical antidepressants, because currently we can define it as a global geopolitical depression period, but we don't have any treatment or answers readily to them. Turning to Middle East, which this panel also covers, the Israel problem tops the list. And we are having Israel problem and Palestinian issue. Issues can be addressed and deal with, but problems are not an easy thing to solve. We have entered a new era where Israel, alongside its genocidal actions, actively seeks to ignite a regional war. It's quite clear since the October 7th, Netanyahu's only policy was at some point reach a kind of regional war where it can use as a leverage to pursue his policies, which I'm not sure if he has any strategy for short-term or mid-term. This problem no longer remains confined to the region. It has evolved into a critical component of global geopolitical crisis. This wasn't the case. This is a new phenomenon. Washington's irrational and unyielding support for Israel only globalizes the issue further. If the geopolitical power, geopolitical mind, and strategic aims of the US is reduced to the level of fanatical ethnocratic government of Israel, it will have bitter and dire consequences for both America and the world. Turning US geopolitics into Israel's theocratic myths and Zionist ambitions, turning US Congress into Israeli Knesset will bring the real cost for the Washington. Again, these sentences were unfamiliar, at least in the conventional academic and think tank meetings. But when you have US president calling himself as a Zionist, this lexicon is readily available for everyone, and I think it's easy and suitable for us to reply in this way. On the regional front, the geopolitical depression and economic Cold War playing out globally will undoubtedly impact Middle East, posing serious risks and threats. The traditional tools, mainly non-state actors, regional states have relied on for years, will lose its strategic utility. It was a big issue for the last 2 decades, non-state actors, but usually we have non-state actors, as I said many times. There are also non-acting states. And the second is the main reason of having the first one. I think that era is going to be changing, and it's not a bad thing. Non-state actors, particularly, will hold little value in these rising tensions, and Iran's direct and open response to Israel in recent aggression against Tehran highlights this shift. Definitely, they will be there, but the mainstream politics and the geopolitics and the security measurements will be at the front. At this juncture, the major regional powers can address their issues more effectively through conventional diplomacy and serious security engagement. The region is capable of finding its own solutions to the challenges, from Syria and Iraq to Palestinian issue and the Gulf stance in the region. The US, for its part, offers almost nothing to the region beyond irrational Israel-centric proposals. Hopes that next month's US election will alter this dynamic remain dim. No one is expecting any positive agenda out of US elections. Emerging from this bleak outlook is, of course, no simple task. Yet the nations of the region face two distinct paths. Either they will fully grasp the gravity of the current crisis, or they will chase tactical victories in the midst of the global geopolitical and economic turmoil, ultimately losing the medium and long-term perspective. The countries of the region, Turkey, Iran, Egypt, and Saudi Arabia mainly, must turn a wide open new window of opportunity, a new page. This is a must for them, or the tactical wins, tactical aims will again darken their short-term and mid-term perspective. And this new chapter must address two crucial areas, and I am finishing. First, their mutual relations, as just mentioned with His Excellency from India. It's quite important. In fact, they now possess a more positive agenda when you compare the past. Currently, at least I'm in these four countries I just mentioned, which can shape region easily, their intra-relations are more positive than when you compare to last 10 years, for example. The looming threat of regional war could further strengthen this positive agenda. The more Israel-threatening region with the regional war, as we see last 2 weeks, Iranian president visited regional countries, and this will open a new page easily if they like to. They should understand that last 2 decades alone proved that neither their safe, self-inflated visions and ambitions, nor their geopolitical capacity was good enough to bring them strategic and solid gains. Rather, some tactical wins with a huge burden, which many of them are paying back. Second, these countries need a fresh perspective on regional crisis, particularly the Syrian conflict, shared vision to deal with Israel problem. From Turkish perspective, Syria is one of the most important issues, where actually many fragilities could happen under the Syrian crisis. Iraq is a positive agenda place. They could have shared economic interest over there, and the new economic development corridor program is a good opportunity. And lastly, Eastern Mediterranean is a common interest area in the age of energy crisis in Europe, especially after the invasion of the Ukraine. So if they want to find the positive agenda pages, they have. But we don't know if the will, political will and geopolitical will be there. Only a new regional order initiative can counterbalance Israel's threat of regional war. Otherwise, there is nothing left in front of Israel to stop this aggression and the genocide. In conclusion, while Israeli problem heightens the risks, it also increases pressure to resolve broader regional problems. Let's hope countries in the region will develop or produce a kind of political will. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Taha. So, very good analysis related to your foreign policy currently. Thank you very much. Professor Jaspal, you are very welcome also here again in our conference, second time. So you have the floor without any kind of extra introduction. Professor Zafar Jaspal is the Dean of School of Politics and International Relations in Quaid-i-Azam University in Islamabad. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Flavius, Professor Morasan, and Monica for providing me this opportunity to speak on a very important topic, especially very learned audience and among the speakers. Let me first fix myself how I look or my country look. Political stability in the Middle East, security stability in the Middle East, or economic prosperity in the Middle East as always collectively brings fresh breeze towards Pakistan. Any kind of the instability causes instability in Pakistan. So our cultural, religious, economic integration with the Middle East is so strong that dissociating is too difficult. So having said this, I'm not going to longer discussion, but limiting myself on the topic which Flavius advised me. Let me start with a caveat from a morning professors. The caveat has been now established that old world order is in a fast decay, and the new world order is failing to take a shape. So what is there? There is a vacuum. This vacuum has been filled by anarchist forces, systemic anarchist forces, not only in one region, but at entire global level when we focus on the regions. So that's why today you have 5 nuclear flashpoints at the different regions of the world, including Middle East. So my topic is here in the Middle East, but let me to draw your attention towards the 2 recent developments in the Ukraine context. First is that eco-Cuban Missile Crisis in Europe. When I say this, I'm referring to the July 10th agreement between the United States and Germany for the deployment of 1,000-kilometer range, cruise Tomahawk 1,500-kilometer range, and in the coming day by 2026, hypersonic kill vehicle. So this is a trend in the Europe, and immediately you have seen in the follow-up, President Putin announced modernization of their nuclear doctrine. And maybe that's the reason in the morning, Excellency Jane referred to this tactical weapon needs to revisit or rethinking. The second important thing in this context is that when we look about NATO's 75th summit communique, it has started saying that now it is also looking Asia Pacific as an important security zone. Maybe in the Pacific they have it or not, but in Asia, Middle East is the burning sort of a thing. Among my 5 traces of the nuclear flashpoint, where I said that my emphasis is today on the Middle East, I cannot ignore the Ukraine, Taiwan Strait, Korean Peninsula, South Asia, whether it's LOC, line of control, India, Pakistan, or LSC, line of control between the line of actual control between China and India. So I will limit myself within the Middle Eastern side. If you see in the Middle Eastern, yes, Israel is a nuclear weapon state, has been a nuclear weapon state, tested a nuclear device by 1979, but maintaining always ambiguity. But everyone knows that it's a nuclear weapon state. But in that context, when we look about the Israel, there is a big shift in the last 1 year in the Israel's nuclear policy. And this shift, when you look about the Israel's nuclear policy, the first shift was last year in September 2023, Prime Minister Netanyahu was making a speech at the United Nations General Assembly. There he said that we need a credible nuclear threat against Iran. The signaling of a credible nuclear threat this wording at the United Nations General Assembly, what it gives you. That's important. Though later on they say it was I wanted to say credible military threat, but it's a signaling was there. The second signaling was immediately in November 2023. The Israeli culture minister said we should nuke Gaza with nuclear devices. What was the objective of this? Just as a student of strategic studies or international politics, I think the objective of these two statements one can read in linking with Israel's famous, what we call it, Samson strategy, which says that it is going to, for a maximum retaliation against a state which launched military action or operation against it. And it includes the last resort use of nuclear weapons and all these kind of these things. Try to see that from the very beginning, Israel has been following counter-proliferation policy through its preventive strike strategy. It struck against Iraq 1981, 2007 Syria, and conducted covert like this malware, you can say, kind of a spy attack or cyber attack on the Iranian nuclear facility. But that has not fastly worked. But within this context, when we look about this Israel's Samson strategy, it is basically for deterring the other powers to intervene. But interestingly, when we focus on the Israel's military strategy, it has been limited to counter the non-military functional neighboring states or non-state actors. Now it has to strike or retaliate a country which is nearly 2,000 kilometers away. Can Israel has air power to go for this kind of a sortie without the air refueling support? Definitely, it has its mechanism, but then again, no one can underestimate Iranians' missiles surface to Israel. Yeah. But at the same time, when we look about this kind of a context, where is the United States? United States is actively part of the conflict. It has been conceptually part of the conflict by constituting minilateral strategic groups or security alliances like Quad and I2, U2 in the Middle East. It is equally there by the AUKUS. And if someone is saying that it is just relaxing, on 1st October, when Iranians launched more than 180 missiles barrage, at that time there were 2 destroyers of the Americans, including the Cold Destroyer. They were intercepting the Iranian missiles. Despite that, they hit the targets in Israel. So in this context, when we look about, there was a famous American professor wrote a tweet. He said, according to now, immediately wrote 32 counts successful near the, you can say, Tel Aviv. So I think that worked. Iranians have been gradually unfolding their capabilities, starting with the April and this time now. And now where is we are? We are here in a very interesting and critical time for our research. The important thing in this context is, when you look about JCPOA, that was a brilliant strategy to contain Iranians' uranium enrichment. According to that agreement, by 2018, when the Americans exited, Iran had a 3.7% enriched uranium. Agreed, whether there is a different, one cannot debate, just go for that. But from now onward, on 29th, I think August, International Atomic Energy Agency released, 2024, a report that Iran has now 60% enriched uranium. Whether it's correct or incorrect, but please keep in mind, a country having a successful nuclear program, civilian nuclear program, has a capacity to enrich the uranium, whether it's a 60% or 80%. For me, as a student of this area, 20% plus is devastating. You can use it for dirty bombs. You can use it for anything. Think hypothetically. If Iranians go with the same missiles, instead of a conventional warhead, it's some uranium enriched, whether it's a 20%, 50%, 60% plus purity, it will create havoc. So that's thing is, this is the actual reality. But now, before closing my speech, I'm struggling to draw your attention towards the three speculations. First speculation, which I have been seeing in the morning to now, what and where Israel will strike. I think it's an open secret, hypothetically, 4 targets. Military targets, I mean the missile silos or build-up. Second is oil and gas facilities. Third is nuclear facilities. And fourth is Iranian leadership. Now, in this context, that leads us to a second, you can say, speculation, that if it go for a military targets, it makes a sense, quid pro quo, that doesn't make a much difference. Remaining all three have a different kind of the repercussions. So if they strike, which are more easier than to strike, the oil and gas, entire Europe will suffer. Here, keep in mind, way back when Americans were contemplating to conduct a surgical strike against the Iranians' nuclear facilities, at that time the voices were they will pollute the Strait of Hormuz. Strait of Hormuz will be automatically polluted when they strike on the gas or these kind of the facilities, so entire world will be having an economic shock. But at the same time, the second perception is Israel able to hit Iranian nuclear facilities, and what will be the repercussions? You have to keep in mind, they are not an ordinary state. In the last 25 years, their program has been systematically facing a targeting. If they have a concrete bunkers of 15 to 16 layer of material, no conventional strike can break. Surgical nuclear strike, Israel don't have a capacity. If the American ally, let's think, if they strike a nuclear facility, hypothetically Basra, reactor under the IEA safeguard, it would be a new Chernobyl, a new kind of a Chernobyl, or what we call it, Fukushima Daiichi consequences. Can region afford it? Can a neighborhood afford it? So that is not easy. If they are thinking that, okay, this is their military uranium-enriched facility, we are striking it, who knows where they are? IAEA just said there are 5 new facilities. So no capacity, neither Americans nor, I think, the Israelis. So this speculation must be more realistic, and one cannot be in a military adventurism. My third speculation is that since a few days in the social media, there was a speculation about Iran's nuclear program, and they said it has conducted the underground clandestine nuclear test. I don't think there's no need for that. If they have a uranium enriched program, Hiroshima experience tells us first generation of the nuclear weapon having a uranium fissile material don't need a testing. Iranians are very smart diplomatically. Why they test? And invite unwanted criticism. They have already nuclear weapons capability. In this context, if you follow the IEA reports or other things, if they are politically observing a restraint, let them to restrain. So, what is my final conclusion? That when we look about this region, Middle East, it had already a nuclear capabilities there. If I take the Turkey as a part of the periphery of the Middle Eastern state, whether it's a part of Middle East or not, but it is Middle Eastern state in that certain definitions, NATO's nuclear weapons were deployed there. If I focus on the Israelis, nuclear weapons were there. If I focus on the Iran, nuclear capability was there. If I focus the neighbor of the Iran, Pakistan is a nuclear weapon state, declared nuclear weapon state. Now coming back to the fast forward. Today what is happening, Israel has, you can say, started raising the curtain and making more clearer about its nuclear weapons capability by their prime minister or their statements. Iranians are also raising the curtain and saying, yes, we have a certain capability. JCPO or no more. So Iranians ballistic missile. In the modern time, I think professors like Jane, Excellency, you people can explain us. acquiring a fissile material is not a problem. Problem is a delivery vehicle. Instead as a sharp Fatah supersonic missile, delivery vehicle is there. So what is the next? Nuclear non-proliferation regime thrown out of the window, not in the region, but out of the world. So in this, finally, I can submit, let's focus that keeping in mind 20th century's nuclear security architecture has withered completely, non-functional. Anywhere you identify it, it's non-functional, including Middle East. So from where we start? Let's start from where actually Jain came up with this new lexicon. Lexicon for the, what you call it, institutions, terminologies, and looking forward, which kind of states we have to deal. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor. Yeah, very also challenges and conspiracy points of view. So thank you very much, Professor Jaspal. Now we'll have a viewpoint from coming from Qatar. We have Professor Luciano Zaccara. He is the Research Associate Professor in Gulf Politics and Gulf Study Center and Qatar University. Please, Professor.
Thank you. Thank you very much. First of all, thank you, Flavius and MEPEI, for inviting me. Second, I usually, when I come to this kind of event, I always talk about Iran, but because it is my main area of expertise, but since we have many representatives talking about Iran, and Iran has been mentioned very often along the day, and it will be mentioned more times, I decided to talk about a little bit about one actor that so far has not been mentioned in the whole day, which is Qatar, which is the country in which I have been working for 11 years so far. So, and since the title of this paper was about emerging regional powers, one can say that according to the traditional way of defining regional power, Qatar cannot fit with this definition, considering the small size, the small population, and many other issues that they make Qatar not matching with that definition. However, I try to argue that Qatar is becoming an emerging regional power with much more, thank you, with a very interesting capacity to influence the regional environment in which Qatar is involved. That capacity did not come overnight. I mean, Qatar was forced to have a new strategy to deal with the world and with the region mainly, something that we can call a strategic survival need in order to survive in the middle of a region that had already three big powers like Iran, Iraq, and Saudi Arabia that historically had been fighting each other or competing with each other and sometimes invading other countries like Saddam Hussein did in 1990 with Kuwait. So from this strategic survival mechanisms that Qatar decided to use, first of all, one had to do with the soft powers mechanism that were able to provide visibility, worldwide visibility to Qatar. I'm not going to talk too much about this, only mentioning Al Jazeera. I mean, the fact that Al Jazeera started to exist in 1995, 1996, or earlier, I don't remember exactly the date, Al Jazeera was founded, put Qatar in the map, not only in the region, but worldwide. Qatar Airways was another instrument, the World Cup that concluded 2 years ago, that made possible Qatar to be known very far from the region, not only in Europe or the United States, but only in Latin America, Africa, and Asian countries. Cultural and educational projects like Qatar Foundation, all the universities that they came with the Qatar Foundation project. But not only soft power tools were used in order to guarantee the survival of Qatar, military aspects were also included. The fact that Qatar constructed, after an agreement with the United States and also with the UK, the Al Udeid base in Qatar, the biggest American base outside or the biggest American base in the region, but I think it's the biggest American base elsewhere outside the US, that is jointly administered but paid totally by Qatar, is supposedly the main guarantee in terms of hard power. It's the guarantee that supposedly is preventing Qatar from being attacked. Then we can discuss from being attacked by whom. Eventually, every time we discuss about the role of this base with our colleagues during the blockade that Qatar suffered between 2017 to 2020 by Arab United Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, and Egypt, most of us conclude that the base would never have been used in order to defend Qatar if the Saudi Arabia decided to invade, which is something that has been under discussion. But also Saudi Arabia signed an agreement with Turkey to have a small base that is more symbolic than effective, but at least is showing that Qatar is trying to diversify also the military alliances with other countries to guarantee these military connections with external forces. Why Qatar needed this? I said before, the region is already a not very safe environment for small states, and the blockade that was conducted during 3 years and where Iran contributed a lot to overcome the constraints that the blockade imposed, mainly airspace given to Qatar Airways to be able to operate, otherwise they wouldn't have been able to do it. But gave the Qataris the justification for all the policies that they have been implemented since the 90s. Why? Because when the blockade started, everybody knew where Qatar was. If the blockade had been earlier before, maybe not many people would have known what was the reason for the blockade or which were the objectives of the blockading countries. And what I said that this strategic survival mechanism that Qatar implemented since the 90s worked. In this case, they served as a deterrence tool to prevent Saudi Arabia or other countries to invade Qatar, even though the blockade is one step not very far from a more bigger military engagement. Another element that Qatar has been using also to put itself in the map and to become important and efficient in determining some rules of the regional game is the mediation effort. Qatar has been very effective in mediating in many conflicts, regional and extra-regional conflicts. Qatar is trying to go beyond mediating between Palestinian factions, between the United States and the Taliban, between the United States and Iran. Qatar has tried to, I'm not sure if it was efficient or not, but they were supposed to mediate between Venezuela and United States, meaning that the range of Qatari mediation interests is much beyond, further beyond the limits of the region itself. And of course, we have the mediation effort that I would say not very successfully Qatar is trying to do together with Egypt in the current war against Gaza. The frustration by the Qatari authorities was shown several months ago when they were even mentioning the possibility to abandon that mediation due to the lack of compliance from both sides equally. So, what is the situation of Qatar now in this new, I would say, regional disorder that we are witnessing since October the 7th last year, where no rules are applicable anymore. International law seems to be not useful anymore. It was mentioned here, the United Nations Security Council is not working, or at least what they say, nobody cares. ICG and the other court, whatever they say, nobody also pays attention. And when, as Keihan also mentioned, deterrence is not working anymore. I mean, when we talk many times about deterrence along this table. I wanted to say also my 2 cents about that. Neither Iran was able to deter any other, Israel to attack. Neither Israel was able to deter any other actor to attack. And this is interesting on the light of the discussion about nuclear weapons that we mentioned before. Even though Israel is an undeclared nuclear power, they were not able to use that as a deterrence against neither Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, or Iran. And considering that the 2 attacks of Iran with the conventional missilistic capacity could have targeted nuclear sites, and this did not deter Iran to do so. Which brings me to a future hypothesis. If Iran decide to change the nuclear doctrine and to become a nuclear military power, would that deter Israel to attack if they want to do it? I highly doubt it. But this is something that has to do with the speculations that we mentioned before. So, to come back to Qatar and to finish, Qatar became, I think, an indispensable actor in the region, despite the fact that so far in the Gaza war has not been very successfully. But it's an actor that can become or is becoming a regional power using specifically soft power mechanism, using an effective diplomacy, and trying to exert its influence beyond the MENA region. In the current context of regional disorders, as I mentioned before, I truly believe that, it's not because I'm living there, but I truly believe that Qatar is an effective or efficient actor that can be or should be considered in the resolution of different conflicts that they are emerging in the region. Mainly because the capacity of Qatar to connect or to be interlocutor with non-state actors that were mentioned also here. The fact that Qatar contributed to the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan because they hosted dialogue between the Taliban, that it was a non-state actor and even considered as a terrorist group, with the United States, on behalf of the United States request. The fact that Hamas office was or is still in Qatar, again, following U.S. request and accepted by Israel in order to have some interlocutor to talk to in a neutral place. So it's showing that Qatar has the capacity to reach out with non-state actors, that they are becoming also important in the regional conflicts, and that Qatar can become this venue to facilitate the dialogue between the state actors and the non-state actors. I will leave it here, but if there is something else, of course we can talk.
Thank you very much. Very comprehensive presentation as a Qatar state. Thank you very much. So we have a two very short online interventions. One is from Moscow and one from Beijing. So from Moscow we have Dr. Vasily Kuznetsov. He is Deputy Director of Institute of Oriental Study from Russia Academy. Professor, please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Flavors. First of all, thank you very much for inviting me to the conference. It's a great event. When I was preparing for this talk, I took some notes. But then I heard very similar ideas in the talk of Professor Musavian and some other colleagues. I hope that this says more about Genesis thinking in a similar way, rather than that none of us, including me, have any original ideas. Instead, we all feel seriously confused, frustrated, sometimes terrified of what is happening in the region. When we talk about the role of external actors in the Middle East, the most important thing to say for me today is not that this role is dimension for almost everyone, but that they all lack any strategy for the region and the regional order. Yes, everyone agrees that this new regional order is necessary, that it should be built within the region and not based on external pillars, external guarantees, but no one is ready to invest enough in in the region. Partly this is due to the changing role of the Middle East. Of course, it remains important for everyone, and of course, a large regional war is bad. However, such war doesn't pose a direct threat to almost any of the external actors. The exceptions are Russia and the European Union. I will talk about Russia later. The limited resources that these actors have are enough to fulfill their obligations to partner and allies in the region, as long as we are talking about limited conflicts like we have now. As in the case, strategically, this means that these partners and allies today need to think about the day after tomorrow, about how they will ensure their security after the influence of external guarantors will be further reduced. Here we see several strategies. Some of the regional actors rely on other regional partners. The other regional actors try to eliminate threats today while external guarantors are still working. This is the path chosen by Israel. The problem is that the tactics it adheres to should include not only the destruction of the enemy, but the creation of something else in its place, something friendly. However, it doesn't come to this, and Israel's ability to create something friendly in place of Hamas or even Hezbollah is very doubtful. Now, a few words about Russia's role in the region. The situation in which Russia finds itself now is somewhat paradoxical. On the one hand, the importance of the Middle East for Russia's foreign policy has grown in recent years. There is not a single state in the region that has joined to the anti-Russian sanctions, but there are several allied states, although their relations with each other are quite tense. An important task for Moscow remains, firstly, strengthening allied and partnership relations, and secondly, filling them with more content. If earlier it was almost exclusively a question of military political relations, today logistical, economical, scientific, technical and humanitarian cooperation have become important aspects. There are aspects, these aspects make partnership relations not formal but real. On the other hand, it is quite obvious that Russia's capabilities to increase its military political influence in the region and to resolve conflicts in it are very limited now. The existing capabilities are associated with maintaining a military presence in Syria and maintaining diplomatic relations with all regional players, including Hamas, Hezbollah, and others. At the same time, if earlier than 10 years ago, it was quite possible to interact with the United States in certain areas, understanding that the interests of the two countries in the Middle East don't always contradict each other, today such interaction is of course impossible. In these conditions, Russia turns out to be the country that is more interested in a regional solution to regional problems than anyone else of the external players. What needs to be done for this and what can be done? I think the first point, I have 5 points here. The first point is the strengthening of the unity of the Palestinians. In February, we held the fourth inter-Palestinian meetings, and which ended with the adoption of a joint document. This document was then developed during the meeting in Beijing. And now we're talking about Moscow process for inter-Palestinian rapprochement. The second point is the continuation of the rapprochement between the Arab monarchies of the Gulf and Iran. Here, Kaihan noticed that the current situation hasn't spoiled the Iranian-Saudi relations, and that's good. I think that the Russian concept of the security in the Gulf region is on the table now, and I think that Russia will invest in promotion of the concept. The third moment is the reintegration of Syria into the region. Syria's return to the Arab League was a positive start. The strategy should be continued. And I think we'll work on this issue too. The fourth moment is the problem of Israel. Today, the possibilities of external influence on this country are very limited. Only the United States has these possibilities, but Washington will probably not use them until November, and the next month and a half, when it would use them, it is also very doubtful that it will do it. I believe that the change in Israel's policy will be connected firstly with war fatigue, secondly with a change in leadership in the country, and thirdly with a gradually common understanding of the red lines for this country in the region. And the fifth moment, after this, it will be necessary to develop new proposals, new ideas, new plan, new roadmap for settling the Palestinian problem. This roadmap should be prepared today, taking into account both the positive and negative experience of Madrid and also Washington process, and they should be interconnected with the concept of the Gulf security system. At the beginning, and it is my last point, when I was listening to my friend Joseph Mahoud, he addressed several questions toward regional and external actors. But also I have not a question, but a note about the regional actors. None of them today has any strategy for Palestinian issue, to tell the truth. They don't, okay, we are talking about regional order, we're talking about regional security system and so on. But what is the place for Israel in this system in the future? What is the regional view for this place? Nobody knows. And those players who knows this place for Israel, they don't know what is the place for Palestinians. I think it is the main problem here. And it is a problem not for Russia, not for Washington. It is a problem for the region. I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vasily. I hope that you can stay a little bit online if there are a few questions also to you. Now we have the last but not least speaker from Beijing. He's supposed to be here, but because of the challenge of flights, he couldn't make it. So we have Professor Liu Shunshun. He is academic vice president and executive director of the China Arab Research Institute from Ningxia University, and also is a council member of Chinese People Institute of Foreign Affairs. Previously, he was the director of Institute of Middle East from Kikar. Professor, you have the floor, please.
Okay, thanks, Chairman. Good morning, everyone. It's my great honor to attend this conference. So I know you guys are eager to take a coffee break. So I try to make my presentation as short as possible. I will share 4 observations with you. The first is that I think there are actually 3 wars in the Middle East at the present time. The first is guerrilla war or militia war. The second is a high technology war. The third is a morality war. For the first war, the guerrilla war, the non-state actor, including Yemen's Houthi and Hamas and Hezbollah and the Iraq militias, They fighting guerrilla war with Israel, and the non-state actor has a huge advantage over the guerrilla war, and Israel is on the disadvantaged status. For the high technology war, the Israel has a huge advantage, and the non-state actor is on the disadvantaged position. So for the morality war, the Israel is also on the disadvantaged position. No matter that is in UN Assembly or UN Security Council or international court, the international community is always criticizing Israel. So the problem is that the three wars are intertwined together. So each side think it has the advantage. It can fight in the future. It can win the war. That is make the end of the war is very difficult. So that is my first point. The second point is that I think there are two wars in the Middle East. The first is the necessary war. The second is the chosen war. For the necessary war, I think the war between Hamas and Israel is the necessary war, because the Hamas and Israel has raised the existential threat to each other, so they must fight with each other. And the war between Yemen Houthi and Israel, between Hezbollah and Israel, between Iran and Israel, between Israel and Iraqi militias is the chosen war. For example, on the last year's October 7th, the Hezbollah initiated attack Israel. That is chosen by Hezbollah. But recently, the Israel has attacked Hezbollah heavily. That is chosen by Israel. So for the necessary war, I don't think there is a negotiated solution. But for the chosen war, I think it is possible, or it is likely to reach some kind of ceasefire and negotiated solution. So based on that analysis, I think it is likely that Iran and Israel to avoid full-scale war. So that is my second point. The third point is that for the current war in the Middle East, the great power politics do not play important role. Actually, among the great power, United States is the only great power which intervened in the Middle East war. United States is not only intervened, United States is part of the war in the Middle East. But the other great power, including Russia and China, did not militarily directly involved in the war. So great power politics is not an important part of the current conflict in the Middle East. So the fourth point I want to make is that what is China's interest? What is China's policy toward the current Middle East? I think for China, the most important interest is economic interest in the Middle East. China is the biggest oil importer from Middle East. China is the biggest trade partner of the Middle East. So the peace and stability is very important for China's economic interest. So what China has done in the past year is to pursue the peace and stability in the Middle East. We think the economic development can lead to peace and stability. We think diplomacy is the most important avenue to the peace and stability. So China has mediated the relationship between Iran and Saudi Arabia. China has mediated the relationship between different Palestinian sections. I think China will continue to play its diplomatic positive role in the future. So I stopped here. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much, Professor New. So even though we are a little bit also run out of the time, but we would like also to have a few questions. I would like at least 3 questions all together, and our speakers to have one answer.
Thank you. If I may, I would have very short comments on some subjects that were mentioned by some speakers. Yeah, with regard to the proxies, the term proxy is defect by itself, deficient by itself. The fact that what we name as proxies are the very organic dynamisms inside the region, due to the fact that the nations in our region, they opted for the resistant narrative due to the fact that the so-called peace narrative didn't work. This is a fact, and Hezbollah was also very original, homegrown, let's say, representation of this new narrative in the region. And you know that Hezbollah was the security guarantor of Lebanon as well as the guarantor of the territorial integrity of Lebanon for many years. And Hassan Nasrallah was the symbol of ending the humiliation of Lebanon and Lebanese nation. And that's why he was so much popular among the people in Lebanon. And I agree with Dr. Bahoud that nobody could, no army or no country could tolerate or afford what happened to Hezbollah. But Hezbollah is still alive. And that's why 10 days of efforts by Israeli forces to infiltrate by ground attack to Lebanon was a failure. With regard to Iran and Israel, just very short, shortly, because it's important.
Okay.
Iran was not the party to opt for this violence. Iran was not the party to select this way. It was due to the provocation by Israel, and you know what happened in Tehran with regard to Haniya, who was the formal guest of Iran for the inauguration ceremony. And Haniya was not military person. He was the head of the political angle of Hamas. And he was assassinated by Israelis. Whenever the Israelis do something, all these provocations, nobody intervene and tell them that please self-restraint. But suddenly, after they feel that Israeli is in the side of the weakness, many messages and many phone calls to Iran that please self-restrain, please self-restrain. So just to tell, sorry, of course, sure. Okay, but there is a chairman. There is a chairman over there. Thank you. There is a chairman over there.
Please, no.
Thank you, Flavius. Thank you. Thank you.
Sorry.
Just.
Hello, Victor Chonga is my name, and a question for Mr. Zakharos, please, because he's coming from Middle East. What do you think will be the impact of the current situation in Middle East on the Abraham Accords? This question is open also to other people who are in the previous panels. But because you are from Qatar, and Qatar is close, is part of the Middle East, the Gulf states, the question is primarily addressed to you. Of course, everybody who would like to answer will be welcome from my point of view. Thank you.
General.
Thank you. My question is directed to Professor Lahoud in Lebanon. I hope he's still online. But fundamentally, I would like to know if the appeals of Netanyahu to a rebellion in Lebanon are just lofty words, or it is something real, if there is any kind of organization, movement that make it happen. I have the feeling it's not a credible action, it's not going to happen, but anyway, I would like to have the opinion of someone on the ground. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. So we have already 3 inputs, and we'll start from the left-hand side. Professor Luciano, if you like to start from your side, because one of the questions is also addressed to you.
Since one question was specific about the Abraham Accords, I think that now it's paralyzed. Doesn't mean that it will be cancelled. I mean, so far neither Bahrain nor Emirates say anything about the possibility to abrogate the deals. And Saudi, even though they said that so far it's not on the table, I mean, the scholarly community in the Gulf claim that sooner or later, once this war, if the war finally finished, they will recover the idea of the Abraham Accords with Saudi Arabia, a country that has been negotiating with the US, supposedly a package that includes maybe the transfer of nuclear technology in order to convince Saudi Arabia to sign that deal. So I would say that even, of course, even though Iran is against that signature of those deals, and they were very clear in complaining about that, saying that we cannot sign deals with Israel because we see what they are doing. The normalization between Arab countries and Israel happened simultaneously with the normalization between Iran and United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia, which means that they are not incompatible. The normalization between different countries can work, and I think it's, even though I don't like it, I don't like the Abraham Accords, because what is happening now is because of the Abraham Accords. There are 2 trends that they can go together, meaning that the tension between Iran and the United States can be reduced, and it's getting reduced, and it's getting a much better situation, and tension between Israel and other countries. Who can accept that, and who cannot accept that is something that.
Thank you very much, Professor Jaspal. If you like to add something.
Say Abraham Accords. One of the reasons now. Is it not working? It is working, right? The main feature was in that accords excluding Palestinians and deciding the so-called final fate of Palestinians without Palestinians. And that felt in the region and amongst Palestinian organizations that this is end of the road. They are going to bury Palestinian issue, and they needed a last exit to show the world that Palestine is over there, Palestinians over there, Israeli problem is over there. And in that sense, October 7th, strategically, a big win for Palestinians. Although tactically Israel may seem they are overcoming the issue. But I would like to also go into, just in a couple sentences, this Israel problem. Israel is I should say, I am actually having a difficulty to define it, but let's say Israel. The biggest problem of Israel is they cannot tell you what they want to be. If it is a state, after all those decades, a state could be defining themselves easily with a couple of standard cliche words. Like if you ask a Romanian, they can tell what kind of state they are. I mean, they can exaggerate, they can criticize, but doesn't matter. I mean, there are common sense to accept a country what it is. But Israel is in a big problem, a vague atmosphere they are not even able to decide what they are going to be. Are they going to be a technocratic state, ethnocratic state, apartheid state, a full racist state, a vassal state? Can secular Israelis live in that state? No one knows. Occupying state. So unless this problem being addressed, this issue will continue sometimes in a very critical moments that we are passing through, or in sometimes it will be a little bit calmed down, but the problem will persist itself. Thank you.
Sharma, please.
Thank you. I just want to just conclude by saying there are few markers which are extremely important at this juncture. The first marker is Israel going to respond to Iranian strikes or not? We are aware that even in India and a couple of other countries, they had indirectly through these countries approached Iran not to launch strikes on 1st of October. But despite that, Iran did it. Now, how is Israel going to respond to that? That's first. Because if they respond, the situation spirals out of control and it goes into a new direction. So that's the first thing. Second thing is, if you look at Israel, it has not been able to achieve any of its politico-military objectives in Middle East beyond, weakening, notionally weakening the axis of resistance. Its 97 hostages are still in the hands of Hamas. There is no clue of them. Secondly, its 70,000 odd people are still displaced as far as Lebanon is concerned. So one of their military objective is now to push this ground offensive up to the line of Litani River, right? And create some kind of buffer zones militarily, and then try and go for some negotiations for the hostages and some kind of a buffer zone kind of a thing. Now all this, whether it is there or not, there are two connected factors on this. First is Mr. Netanyahu is on a borrowed time. The elections are overdue in Israel, so his government is not legally elected. Second, there is an impending trial which is against Netanyahu. There are corruption cases. How does he sort of weather all these challenges? Third is the outcome of the elections in United States of America. Who comes to power and what policy they adopt towards this whole conflict. These are some of the imponderables which will actually give us a clue about which accord, which resolution, and what is the new format under which the peace and rapprochement can be brought about in the region.
Thank you very much, General Sharma. If you have online Professor Joseph, if you can. Yeah, maybe. So, from online, it's a little bit challenge, I think. Vasily, if you like to say something. Okay. So fine. You have.
Okay, no.
Okay, no. Very good.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, please. Yeah, please, Professor Joseph. There was a question for you.
Yeah, I thought you didn't want me to answer. Okay, very, very quickly. On Netanyahu's open call for, look, it's very complicated to answer because much of this is relying on perceptions and on, let's say, a chain of events that could happen that would lead to something. In the short term, no, of course, this is a call that is completely rhetorical. However, first point, it shows an intention from Netanyahu, and this intention is not something new. I mean, we're not talking in a vacuum here. Israel has already tried and succeeded in the past to brew things like that. I gave the example of 1982. The Israeli invasion in 1982 started as a security operation against the PLO, and then it turned out that there was a political architecture behind it. It elected a president of the republic. This president has been assassinated after that. and the civil war lasted for 6 years after this invasion. So this is an example. Now, this leads us to other remarks. And in the long run, these are the factors that I would, let's say, watch. First of all, if Hezbollah is perceived, and I'm underlining perceived, as considerably weakened within the Lebanese, let's say, political chessboard and military chessboard, some people could say, okay, Hezbollah is weakened enough, we can now change the balance of power. This has been changed, this has been said by people this morning on TV. A political leader was saying Hezbollah cannot dictate anymore, whatever. They need a shelter. We're ready to shelter them if they want. So you cannot address Hezbollah this way and expect it to, let's say, budge and etc. unless it is defeated on the ground. Point two, just to give you an idea, I mean, a picture of what's happening in Beirut today, in Lebanon today. Lebanon is a country of 4 million people. You have 1 million Shia displaced from the south who are now sleeping in the streets in Beirut. I'm not telling you stories. You can look at pictures, okay? They are sleeping in the streets. Winter is not yet here. There has been friction so far. Yesterday evening, there was an armed skirmish in one neighborhood of Beirut between them and the owners of the place, who are mainly Sunnis, okay? It can be tonight in a neighborhood of Christians, etc., etc. You have 1 million displaced from the south, who are now in a psychology of wounded people, defeated people, humiliated people, and you have 1 million other Lebanese who are in a mood of victory, of revenge, of Hezbollah is now broken, we will take our revenge on it, because Hezbollah has not always been very friendly with all Lebanese. And then you have, and forget it, and I want to put it in the picture, 1 million Syrian refugees in Lebanon who have rejoiced very openly the day Nasrallah was killed, because they have been displaced from Syria mainly by Hezbollah's action. If you put this cocktail together, all it takes is either a mismanagement from the Lebanese side or a willful action by Israel to light up a match and throw it in this cocktail, and the country could go towards a new civil war again. Then the last point has to do with Hezbollah. And this is why my first question was about what is today remaining of Hezbollah? What will be the course of Hezbollah tomorrow? Will it say, okay, we have lost the military party with Israel, now let's get back to the Lebanese political game and become a political faction like any other and behave like any other, etc.? Or are they today in the course of rebuilding their military apparatus, not only in the south, but internally, and say, we haven't lost anything, what we had in Lebanon before this last round of violence, we want to keep it, and then they will keep it, my bet, against the will of other Lebanese. So these are the ingredients. Now, you make whatever you want with that. I'm giving you the ingredients. I don't know the answer, but I know that over time, this could spiral towards something nasty and silly. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Joseph. Now, we have the last intervention, Professor Kehan Barzegan. Vasile, no.
Okay, if I can add this, I think the Iranian culture of deterrence is being changed with this war in Gaza. I mentioned earlier that how much, this is really going too much deep in the Hezbollah issue, has led the Iranian deterrence thinker that Iran needs to act directly. And my point is that deterrence is evolving in the regional politics, and it might change from its traditional way of deterrence. And right now, the point is that if we have escalations by Israeli response, or the second Iranian response, retaliation to is real, then what would be the next level of escalation? Then if we have another step up, the situation will be extremely complicated. Then Iran needs to somehow add to its deterrent power. There it is the issue of Iranian nowadays thinking of changing their nuclear doctrine. This is I think going to a very complicated situation. In Iran we have this expression that no one can judge about our security. Whenever we see that our security is endangered, the security of a state is endangered, then we act. What is the line? We don't know. But they act very fast, and beside the military aspect of escalation, we now see the political aspect of escalation as well. When we talk of bringing the US in the equation or not, both sides are thinking. That makes things very complicated. So let's hope that we don't go in that direction.
Thank you very much. We conclude here our panel, and I invite you to have a lunch. A short comment. Okay, just very short.
Conference. And I'd like to say a few things on religious interdependency.
Very short, very short.
Because we had in first panel something related to cultural interdependency, and culture is connected a lot with religion. Before 89 here, our great philosopher Noika was speaking about God through culture, because it was forbidden. It seems that Western Europe is doing the same thing now without religion. First panel spoke about Pax Americana. Professor Severino did it. I think we should speak more on Pax Abrahamitica.
Okay.
And have all religion together, because we have Jerusalem together, and it should be more done on this religious side in reconciling people.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you very much, because you should also conclude.
That's why I like to underline this point, that a religious fact should work a lot and did the best. In Europe, we have just National Council of Churches without Muslim organizations, and we have here in Romania Consultative Council of religious denominations which can work together with Muslim, Christian, Jews, and all together. And we have some other examples in Europe like that.
Thank you very much, yes, for your remarks.
Yeah, thank you.
So you are approaching, I would like to say, towards the lunch, even though it was so extensive, our both panels. So I suggest you to have lunch, maybe 45 minutes, and after that to come back to the other sessions. Thank you very much. 45 minutes.